Hey, what's up guys, and welcome back to Ask NK. Today we're going to take a look at an amazing open source 2D animation software called Enve. This tool has actually done a whole lot of things over the period that it has been made public to anyone that is about to use it. And we're going to do an entire walkthrough of every single thing you need to know once you're about to start using this tool. Alright, so with Enve open here, you would notice that first things it suggests is for you to go ahead and set the scene. So we're just going to go with the full HD, which is 1920 by 1080, and click on OK. So here you have your canvas. Here you have, where the selected objects are. If you choose to import any object, they live here. This is your scene, and it also serves as a timeline. Round here is where you get to find properties for any object that you have selected. So if you go ahead and select the objects from here, which are the creation objects, which you can use. So you can choose to either, use the point mode, use this to create lines, this as a pencil, this as a brush, this as a sphere or a circle, and then this as a square. You can also choose to run text here, and this is where you manage your scene. So you can create as much layouts and add more scenes as you want, and you can manage all of these things right here. So if I simply select this and close, I will be able to close that, and it is fairly simple and very decent. Right down here, you would notice that this is where it reads for your GPU, your CPU, your hard drive, and also your RAM. So there is a couple of improvements that they've made over a period of time, and it's very interesting to see that there is consistent updates coming from the developer of this tool. Right here where you have the timeline, you have right here the render, which means that you can simply send anything to render and render them right here. So first things you would notice is if you go over to the edit section and go down to the part called your settings, you would see that you have your performance section here. So here is where you can choose what acceleration that you want, and directly here you can also choose to scale your user interface if this is also something that you find interesting. Within this part is also where you can play with the node size. So if you want to play with the node size, you can get up and running with that. And with that done, we're going to start working with this tool. So the very first thing which I would like us to take a look at is how you can actually start creating stuff. So with this tool, these two tools are not for creation. These are for positioning and pushing things around, while this is the one which you're going to use to make your creation. So if I simply click right here, I can start adding points, and I can use this point to create a couple of things. So if, for example, I want to create a very small vase, I can click and click, and I can create whatever thing I want. And you can see the minute you start creating this, automatically it starts adding up to the timeline. So I can go ahead and select this single point which I have, right click, go over to actions, and delete. So with this now, I can go back here and I can simply use this to tweak this point, or tweak this particular thing and get the desired result that I want. So for example, let's say I have this right here, and I have the Bezier curve which I can use to make these changes, and it's quite interesting the kind of things that you would like to, or you can do with this. So next thing which I'll do is play with the draw tool. Draw tool is just awesome. So with the draw tool right now, I can easily go in here, and for example, if I switch over to the pen and leave the mouse alone, I can go in and actually, let's shut this off, which has to do with the paths. All right, so I can go in and I can draw whatever I want. So for example, let's say we're drawing this awesome flower. So we're drawing this, and now I can simply have this right here, and by having this, I can go around and use this bounding box to move this object around. And you might be wondering how we can rotate. So if you want to rotate, you can simply rotate pretty easy. So if you press R on the keyboard, you'll be able to rotate your object based off the pivot. What I mean by that is the tiny point you have here is your pivot point, so you can position this pivot point wherever you want. And now if you press R on the keyboard one more time, you will be able to rotate this way. Now with this done, if you go ahead and press S on the keyboard, you'll be able to scale. If you press G on the keyboard, you'll be able to move. You can still choose to move by clicking and dragging, and that is also another interesting way to get this one going. So there are two pivots that exist here. So there's a local pivot, there's a global pivot, so you can simply switch those around here, and you can see that the color changes as you switch. So this is very interesting. So now that we have this, we can also turn back this, and you can have this here. So what about coloring? Now if you want to color this, you can also proceed to making some cool colors. So for us to do that, or maybe in case you want to color your objects, how you can color this is pretty simple. So let's go ahead and set this to the local, and I would go ahead and lock this, which has to do with our official flower, and then I'm going to position this one right here. So once I have this, I can select this main object. Let's unlock that. I can select this main object as it is, and then we can go over to the fill, and I can choose flat, and I can fill this with whatever color that I want. So now that you've added the colors, if you want to make changes to this, you can simply go right here and you can select this and make the changes that you want. So this is very interesting. Like, you can make any of those changes that you want. And for our second object, I can simply select this object right now. I can go over to flat and maybe select the setting color, and the same thing happens with the line. So within the stroke, if you want to change the stroke, you don't want to have, you know, thicker strokes, you don't want to have any of the stroke, you can simply, you know, tie this all the way out and there is no stroke at all. I think for this, I'm going to select this, and since we have a very good Bezier curve, I can easily make all of those changes right there. And at any point in time you don't like any of the ones that you have a huge set of tool sets that you can simply play with. So I can actually select this right here, and I can go ahead and set this to something else depending on what I want. I can also go ahead and make this very sharp if I want to do that, and at the same time, if I want to set this as curve or maybe something linear, I can make all of those changes from there. I can also select the object and press delete to get rid of it. And these are very, you know, interesting things that you can do on an object that has a stroke, and this would definitely make a lot of sense when you're working with it. So next thing which we would like to also take a look at is, now that we've worked with this, we can simply select this and bring this just a little bit down. And for this, let's say we position this right here. You can play with the shape types. So this shape types, so if you hold down shift, you can get the perfect shape. If you hold down control, you're going to be able to get an oval shape. Now all of these shapes as well can be edited. So if you simply select this, you have certain points which you can use to edit the shape, and at the same time you can simply set this to a fill color and change this to fill. So what I'm going to do now is just simply go in and make a couple of changes. So maybe for something like this, I can change the color, change the way I want, you know, this to appear, and maybe also, you know, make a couple of housekeeping for the shape. So now that you've done making these shapes and changing this, I would like to show you guys one more thing. So one more thing that you can also do within the color is gradient. So let's lose this. First of all, you can see that you have different kinds of stroke type. So you can either choose to make them softer, sharper, or curved, depending on the kind of stroke that you're going for. And for the gradient, if you want to apply gradient to this, so let's say I want to apply gradient to the fill color like this, I can simply select the type of gradient I want, and now we only have radial and also linear. There is no angled and there's no reflective, so we're just going to go ahead and play with the one we have. So if you click on the radial, nothing happens. So how you can actually get this one going is, you need to come over here and you need to actually right click and click on new gradient. So once you add a new gradient, you find out that you have this slider, all right, and you can actually use this to, you know, play with the gradient directly within the viewport. So let's take a look at how you can bring in your own images directly into Enve. So if you want to get in your image or image sequence, which we're going to talk about later, you can simply click on import and you can choose to import your images directly here. One more thing which I think you guys need to know just in case is, if you go over to your edit, go over to setting, you can choose to link up some other app. For example, Krita, GIMP, and MyPaint. You can choose to link them to this app, so you can do all of what you want to do from there and throw them right in and have some kind of workflow between these two apps. So if we go over to file to do, you know, the importing, we can choose to click on import file, and here we would find the image which we want and we can throw that image right in. So let's say, for example, we get in the image which is called image 45 right here. So if we get this image in here, we can actually choose to go in and scale this down, and from here we can, you know, simply animate this image. Now I would draw your attention to what is called the graph editor right here. We're also going to extensively talk about it a little bit. So from here I can simply work around there. Let's say, for example, if I hit the transform, I can, you know, create a keyframe, move over to frame 5, and I can move this to a given point, and you see automatically it creates a keyframe for me. I can also move this to frame 10 and move this back to the center, and at any point you can simply move these keyframes and switch them if this is also something that you would like to get. Let's say we get this back to frame 5 and we want to simply move this down so that we can have a motion that goes from here down and up there. You can also simply get this one going. So you would notice that at the same time there is some sort of evaluation going through, as once this starts playing back, you can see it turns green when the evaluation is done, and if there is no evaluation or if it cannot calculate for that part, it turns red. Right, so from here onwards we can simply press the playback button and get this going. So with this going, there is still some other interesting things that you can do. So you can now, go ahead and select this entire thing. All right, so you can choose to play with the graph editor. So right here you can see that whatever transform attribute has this simply suggests that you can actually go in and start working with it. Right now we've keyframed the position, so that simply means that once we open up the position, you can see the related coordinates that we have this thing's going for. So I can move this over to any part. I can select this and start doing whatever I want. If I want to change it, I want to position this is pretty fine, but the graph editor actually gives you more room to make some adjustments. So if I simply hit the graph editor right now and go back and click on this, you'll see I have this going on. So I can move this around and make some changes. I can turn this off, I can turn this on, so I can also use this to also make some changes. So once our character animation gets to a point like this, I can use this to make some movements changes. So let's actually do that with the Y and the X. So let's say want to move this to this part. So if our animation goes to this part like that, we can even make this even a little bit closer, and we can also select this other one and make it even way more closer and play back. And you can see once the evaluation is done, you get to see the green thingy going back and forth. So this is nice, but to kind of further explain a bit more about the graph editor, we're going to jump back into our previous scene where we'll start talking about how you can actually get this one going. So I can make switches and make changes to the interpolation. So for example, if I grab this right here and go down here, I can choose to make this a Bezier, or I can choose to make this a linear, depending on what I want to make. And let's say if I simply set this the way it is, we can have our animation go in and out like this. All right, so these are some very interesting things that you might want to play with while working with a tool like this, and it's very interesting to see that they have some very cool animation tool sets that you can work with. So the same way that you can work with this is also exactly the same way you can work with the rotation. So if you select the rotation, you can also see right here that you do have this particular thing right here. So I can simply select the key which is responsible, and then I can change the interpolation of that key. So you can see we have the corner, we have the smooth, and then we have the symmetric. So I'm just going to set this to corner so I can be able to make changes to this, and I can simply select this as well, set this to smooth, and still use this to make some interesting changes. So I can make something like this, and once we press our animation or play back the animation, we're going to get that. You can change the position by simply using your graph editor, and you can also get some very interesting results. So very cool stuff that you can do with this tool, and there are some very even cooler things that I really wish to see in some other stuff. So let's say, for example, if you're into working with a tool like this and you're actually thinking about, all right, how do I create some sort of stop animation? Of course, this is going to be very useful. And what about if you want to make some paintings, right? So we're going to keep with this particular project, and I'm just going to go all the way to the back. And with this, if I select the brushes, you would notice we have a huge set of brushes. Right now, once I click on the brushes, what you would notice is you can see the fill and stroke, and then right here you would notice that we have a couple of properties. If I click on this button, I can reveal the amount of brush types that we have in the settings, and if I simply go all the way like this, you can start seeing a couple of them. All of the brushes that we have here, they are all pressure sensitive to a reasonable point. So right now I'm making use of a pen, and I can simply go over and select one of these, and if I choose to start painting, example, if I click, let's simply switch this back and set this all the way back to where it is supposed to be. All right, cool. So if I simply click and start drawing, you can see what we're having because I'm using a pen. And if I start adding pressure, you can see we have more ink coming out. So if you're thinking of making frame by frame animation, of course you can actually use this one to get that one going. So I can grab onto this and I can get that going. For example, let's say if I simply select this in one spot and just doodle across that particular part, or just paint across, you can see we can have that there. And the beautiful part is once you're making this painting, if I simply bring this down, you can see right here that we have the transform, we have the opacity, we also have the canvas. So within the canvas, we can make a huge set of changes. So I can go over from the first frame, go over to the next frame, and I can make changes. All right, and you can see if I go back and forth, you see I have something like that. Let's undo this real quick, and let's add some, some cooler stuff. So I can add this. So I'm just going to add 1, 2, let's just make this 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, so we have this. So I can have this, and I can go over to another frame. Then I can make changes. If you want to see what is going on between individual frames, there is an onion skin that you can always turn on. All right, you can turn on this onion skin and you can see what's going on in between the frames. So I can have this animation go up there. We can go to this, and within the next animation I can simply use the eraser and erase the things which I don't want within this canvas, and then I can start making changes. If I would like to have another animation or maybe change the color while this animation goes on, you can still choose to do that, as I can come in here and introduce something else, and I can go over to the next frame. Then maybe I can introduce another color. For example, let's simply find that. So I can choose to animate this based on a given color, and I can actually, get this to this point, and I can choose to use the eraser or even choose to use the painting tool to, add some extra features. So this supports a lot of things. So you can animate individual points. You can animate as much stuff as you want as this travels through. If I turn this off, which has to do with the onion skin, and I press the playback button, you can see we can have a frame by frame animation going through as this happens. All right, so this is also very interesting, as this makes a lot of sense for anyone who wants to do frame by frame animation. There you go. So you can use the painting features right here to actually add some pretty cool frames and do some frame by frame animation. And this isn't only for that, you can also do that based off the pencils, as they do have some very cool pencils here. So I can simply get that going. We can choose to throw that in there, and let's say we want to add a tiny sprout, and I'm just going to put up that sprout right there, and we can go over to the next frame. Let's zoom right in, use the middle mouse to raise this all the way up, and we can actually go over to the next frame, and we can get this happening. And I'm just going to set this like so, and we can go over to the next frame. So I'm just going to set this. So let's add a keyframe with this. Then I can go over to the next frame. Then I can choose to add some sort of leaf. So let's go ahead and add the leaf feature right here, and also add another leaf feature right here. So I'm also going to do that this way. All right, then we can get this, and maybe in the next frame we can choose to clean this up. So I can just go ahead and clean this up. And this is pretty interesting. I mean, if you don't want to use the pen tool right here to make this, and you want to use paintings, you can easily do that. If you want to increase the brush size, you can increase the brush size to get a faster cleaning, and you can get this one going. And with that done, I can still go back and simply switch back to the brush, and then probably I can get even a much more, let's reduce the brush size, and I can even get a much more bigger thingy. So we can have that one going, and we have this beautiful masterpiece. So if I go back and forth, you can see we can start making this type of animation, and this is definitely very interesting. So frame by frame animation, this kills it. You can keyframe your painting, you can make frame by frame animation based off your painting, and you can actually have fun working with this tool. So with this in mind, you can also go in and use the text tool, and for the text tool you can choose to just draw in the text that you want, and I'm just going to call this Enve for example. And with this I can click on OK, grab this right there, select this main tool, select the main object, so you can change whatever font that you want. So with this selected, you can go in here and use Lato for example, which is a very good font, and you can just simply have that there. You can switch these over to black, you can have that. You can choose to increase the size. At any point in time you want to make changes, you can double click and make the changes, and there you have it. Colors and all that things also apply, as you can always go back and using the channels that you have right here, you can change this to any beautiful thing that you want to create. So with this said, let's take a look at how you can bring in images, how you can reference these images, and how you can work with them directly here. So if you want to work with images that you have, you can easily load these images right here. So for that, you need to go over to File, Import Image Sequence, locate the file where it is. So for our case, we have this file stored in a wonderful drive. So I'm just going to go ahead and find that and select the folder that is responsible. Right here, we're using Embergen's export. And for those who don't know what what EmberGen is. It's a tool which you can use to create real-time volumetrics. So I'm going to simply select and grab that right in there. So you can see automatically it loads this sequence here, and you can also see it says EmberGen export and the image sequence is right here. So you can use these blending forms to blend this against the background. I'm just going to move this over to this part, press S to scale this up. So with this here, the next thing which you want to do is press the playback button, or you can press spacebar, and this is going to playback. So if you have an animation that is just 10 seconds long, and you know this simply plays all the way to about 200, and you want to reduce that, how you can actually get this going is by simply going over to scene within the menu and then go over to settings. Now when you go over to the settings, you can now simply change this. So let's just set this to 50. You can change the frame rate right here, and this is by default what you should do in the beginning before you actually start making your stuff. And with that done, you can simply, you know, have that going. So you can go back to scene, go over to settings, and you can make the changes right here. So you can also change your, you know, your background if that's also something you want to do. And with that, you can press on OK, and you would get your timeline fitting exactly this. You can actually see it from here, from 0 all the way to 50. So with this, once you press the playback button right now, it gets to 50 and then it stops. There is actually no loop for this, and it's one of the things which I really wish that this tool has. So let's go ahead and scale that volumetric thingy a little bit more, press the space bar, get this happening, and that's going to be about it. So one other cool feature, or one other tool that you can also use, is the sculpting tool. So if you click on the sculpt tool, you can simply, let's go ahead and close this, you can simply click right here. Now with the sculpt tool selected, you can choose to animate this object by sculpting. Now, what I mean by that is, once you have this selected and you move over to another part or another frame within the timeline, and you click down here, you can choose to turn the animation on. So by simply clicking on the part, you can turn the animation on. So let's go over to frame 0 and let's turn this on and move this over to about frame 6. And we start sculpting this, or we start moving this. If we move this all the way back and forth, you can see we are animating this as it flies through. Another thing which you can do is, at this point, if you want to smooth out the edges, if you hold down shift, you can easily smooth out some points. All right, so you can choose to smooth this out. You can move this over to a point. Then you can also use your mouse or your pen to get this going. I kind of found a little problem with the pen, owing to the fact that now that I'm using the pen, if I switch over to pen, you can see if I start sculpting, I get some sort of, you know, funny details. I think it has to do with the pressure thingy. All right, contrary to the mouse, like you can simply use this to get larger stuff. With the pen, I simply get some things not happening. Like I can't really drag this as much as I want. I guess it might have to do with some smoothing or something. Probably it's a setting from me, I don't know. So you can also use shift like in every other sculpting tool to smooth out this, and once you press the playback button, you can have that very crazy animation happening. Exporting from here is very simple, which you can do by coming over to the render section, and then you can specify what and where you want to render stuff and hit on the render. If you want to add this render, you need to go over to settings, add to render queue, and then you can specify where and where things are supposed to be, and that can be done within the setting. And you can change this to video if you want it to be a video. If you want this to be a default PNG, you can simply set that to a PNG, and once you're done, you can go through and hit the render button, and this is going to simply render this out. So this is how you can get started with working with a tool like this. So that's about it, guys. Enve has actually come a long way, and it is an amazing open source 2D animation tool. There's a couple of things that you can find in tools like Moho and, you know, Toon Boom that you probably wouldn't be able to find here. Things that has to do with joints, bones, twinning, all of those features, you might not be able to find those things here. But for the most part, if you're trying to get into 2D animation, frame by frame animation, then this is definitely going to come in extremely handy. So if you want to take a look at the build presently is dated at 17th of May, which is the very current one that we're using right now. You can see that 5.72, and you can see that there's a continuous work on this one. And if you simply go all the way down, you see that consistently there's an update to this, as the graph editor tip was just simply added today. So these are very cool stuff, and if you want to get started with it, you can go over to the link in the description where you can download this and get this one going. So that's about it. I would like to know what you guys think about this beautiful animation tool down in the comment section. And of course, if you like this video or you like something from this, you can go ahead and give it a like, and don't forget to share with a friend. And if you're new here, it's going to be amazing for you to hit the subscribe button and also turn on notifications so that you don't miss the next video or the next update. And until I see you guys again with a tutorial update, Free Friday, Tutorial Tuesday, tips and tricks, things like this. Peace.